I'm Linda Wilson, and I'm the Deputy Director of our WHO Collaborating Center and passionate about global health. So I'm so excited when we get faculty who are as passionate, and Sharon Hamilton is one of them, and Lynn Stover is another. So I'm going to turn this over to Sharon, who's going to tell you about a great study abroad program that she taught last November in the Dominican Republic. And I just wanted to mention that Project Hearts, where they linked with, we learned about through one of the public health students who had done her internship there. So I want to put a call out to and a thank you to the Sparkman Center for Global Health, because we really partner a lot with them. And subsequently, with our interprofessional global health service learning program, groups of students have gone to this same organization in the Dominican Republic, and there's another group, I believe, going this coming spring break. So it's really a neat way to see about some partnerships across campus, and I'm anxious to hear about what you did. So
thank you. Okay, thank you very much. First, I want to introduce two of my students who went with me, Katie Cassidy and Ashley Ball. And I should have two others of the students coming in, and one of them is a public health student. So we're happy to be able to share this with you. We had a ball. We absolutely loved it. So let's get on with what we did. This is just an example of what you're going to see in the Dominican Republic. Is that not gorgeous? Makes you want to not leave. But this is our travel group. This happened to be when we were leaving in the airport. It was a 3-hour elective course. We went over Thanksgiving week, and there were 10 of us all together, 2 faculty and 8 students. And I love the breakdown of our students. We had 3 third-semester undergraduate nursing students, an RN mobility student, an MSN student, a DNP student, a public health undergrad, and a nutrition sciences graduate or doctoral program student. So we had a wonderful variety of people on our trip. Our objectives were pretty broad, and we wanted to look at the culture, the people, the health problems in the Dominican Republic, and we also wanted to look at healthcare and some of the social welfare issues. And another objective that we had was we really wanted to get personal reactions to those cross-cultural experiences, and I think we were able to do that. We had a couple of extra objectives for the graduate students. Hi Josh, come on up front. You don't have to talk. I promised Josh you didn't have to talk. This is Josh Muhammad, and he was our nutrition sciences student. But the graduate students had a little bit extra work. They had a couple extra objectives. Pre-trip, and I don't know if you all will do this in public health or not, but we did a couple things. We had a couple classes with the students, and then each student was assigned a specific health issue in the Dominican Republic. And they researched that and posted it so that we all could be prepared for some of the health issues that we would see. Then all students did what we call a windshield survey. And this is something that we do in community health locally, and we just adapted our tool and used that for the trip. And what this amounts to is before you go, you do a lot of research so that you're very aware of what the demographics and just the general view of the country is going to be. Then we had 2 students who had been to the Dominican Republic back last spring, and they came and spoke to our group, and we found that extremely helpful. Gave us a good idea of what we would be encountering. And then of course we got our immunizations and counseling from the health department, and we're prepared to go. Once we got in country, we did part B of our windshield survey, and that's where it's looking through the windshield of the vehicle. You're gathering data as you're riding around. We arrived at night, and I was concerned that we wouldn't really be able to see very much, but we found just the opposite. Every street corner, if not more often, there were parties going on, loud music and people in the streets. So we got to see a lot in the dark. And then at any time that we were traveling through, we were looking for things like, what does the infrastructure look like? What kind of churches are there? What do the people look like? And we found it, I think, very, very helpful to do that forced observation. This is the flag of the Dominican Republic, just in case you didn't know what it looked like. We didn't before we left. But just a little bit about the people in the Dominican Republic. It's in the Caribbean. It shares the island of Hispaniola with Haiti. It's about 2/3 the size of the state of Alabama, to give you an idea of size. And actually, that's where Columbus landed in 1492, not on the U.S. soil, but in Hispaniola. It's tropical, which we found the minute we walked out of the airport, going from Birmingham in November to the Dominican Republic. Nice. And they also have 1,000 miles of white sand beaches, none of which we got to see. And here was a surprising thing. This Pico Duarte is a mountain in the Dominican Republic, and it's the highest mountain in the Caribbean, and actually it's 4,000 feet taller than Clingman's Dome in Tennessee. So it's really a tall mountain, which I was not aware. They have 2 or 3 different mountain ranges in the Dominican Republic. And we were toward the mountains. We didn't get all the way to the high mountains, but we were out in that direction. People are Spanish speaking, and just so you know, Haiti is French speaking. So we were on the Spanish speaking side. And the ethnicity, you can see, is 73% mixed, mostly European and African. When Columbus landed on Hispaniola, there was a group of Indians, the Taino Indians, that were on the island. Those all got eradicated from disease and whatnot, but there still is DNA evidence of that genetic makeup in I think 90-something% of the people. It's 90% Roman Catholic, although they're not terribly devout as a general rule. And they often combine some elements of African folklore and worship into their Catholicism. They've got some real social issues going on. They're primarily 35% female-headed single families, and that's the highest in the world, which is, I did not know that before we explored. The attitude of machismo, that male dominance, is still evident, but it is beginning to diminish a bit. High rate of domestic violence, and it's also a major shipping point for drugs out of South America for the drug cartels. So drugs are a huge problem in the country, although we didn't encounter it. I think our host was very good about shielding us from things like that. Per capita, you can see that it's a poor country, not as poor as Haiti, but it's definitely poor. We eat a lot of their produce. Bananas, sugar comes from there. We also discovered this stone that's called Larimar, that's only mined in the Dominican Republic. So we all had to buy some of that to take home when we went for our one shopping day. They have a new boost with tourism, and that's becoming pretty big. With those 1,000 miles of beaches, of course, they've got plenty to do. And we didn't get to see any of that, so we can't really tell you what that looks like, but I'm sure it's probably grown-up tourism. Ruben, our host, told us that crime was high in the cities in those areas, so we were just as happy not to be a part of that. A lot of poverty, 34%, which is pretty high. And they have a long, long history of corrupt dictators and leaders. time and time again, we saw evidence of that. And I think one of our favorite stories was about this lighthouse that was built to commemorate Columbus's 500th anniversary of discovering the New World. We didn't get to see it. It's this gigantic building that has these lights that point upward, and the building is in the shape of a cross. And so the idea was that they would shine these lights up into the sky, and people looking down from space would see this cross. The interesting thing is when they turn on the lights of the lighthouse, the lights go out in the city. There's not enough electricity to run it. But that's just an example. We saw all kinds of times that dictators had really squandered the money to the expense of the people. And now, this is where we were, the little blue star up there. We were in the Santiago province, out toward the mountains. Can you see the little star? Hi, come on up, Claire. Come on up. This is Claire Finney. She's our public health person. She's been in class like a good girl. Okay, our host. You are in for such a treat going to work with this gentle man. The man in the red shirt is Ruben Odenwald. And Odenwald is not exactly a Dominican sounding name, right? He has, was it his father or grandfather who was Greek? Or grandfather, yeah, who was Greek. So he has a name that's not necessarily Spanish. But Anil is his vice president, and Ruben is the one who founded Project Hearts, and he is the current president. And he is a phenomenal man. Has an interesting history. He was born in the Dominican Republic, and then he was extremely poor, had several near-death experiences as a child. Then when he was a young teenager, he moved to New York City where his father was. And he spent the next many years there, and went into a monastery and was a Franciscan monk. And I don't know if you know about Franciscan monks, but they have the vow of silence. So Ruben told us that he kept getting into trouble because he kept trying to talk to the other monks. And when you meet Ruben, you'll see that he never stops talking. He's a very outgoing person. So a wise person that gave him some counsel said, Ruben, every time you talk about your people in the Dominican Republic, you light up. You need to go back to where your people are and work with your people. So he did, and it's a wonderful thing that he did because he has a love for his people that it touches the heart, right? Okay, what Project Hearts does is, Ruben is big on education, and he feels that the way to get people out of poverty is education, which we certainly agree to that. But they do things like build houses for needy families. They provide these improved cook stoves because if you don't know, one of the major health hazards in developing countries is smoke inhalation for women and children because they cook over open fires. So these cook stoves are an attempt to resolve that. They also they have water security issues. It's tropical, it rains, but the water supply is often tainted. So one of the things that Project Hearts does is look at water systems, water collection systems. And that was pretty interesting to see. They educate people. Project Hearts has built this little school, and they offer education classes in computers and what's the other thing? English classes. And they have kids who walk 45 minutes to come to the classes. And then also he focuses on employment. And what he does, he told us a very interesting story of how he initially, when people would come and say, Ruben, my children don't have food, can you give me some money? And he would reach in his pocket and give people money. And then Ruben, the next week, my family doesn't have any money for food. Can you give me some money? And he would give them money. And he realized that this was not really resolving the problem. So if you've read the book, When Helping Hurts, it talks about how you don't need to just continually give, but you need to empower the people to change their situation. So he changed his philosophy, and instead of just giving people money, he started saying, okay, I'll do that, but you need to cut all these bushes out here on the farm, or you need to do this or that. So every gift comes with something that they give back. And it seems to be working. We saw a man that came and needed some money, and he was out there with his machete trimming the bushes. So our home for a week was Beatoa, and we loved it. We loved it, loved it, loved it. One of the days that we did a walking tour, instead of a windshield survey where you're driving, we walked, and we walked, and we walked. But one of the things that we saw was this hospital in Beatoa. And the interesting thing about it is it had only been open for a year, but it sat empty for a year before that because of political issues. So this community that needed the hospital couldn't use it because of political stuff. You see the emergency department? 2 beds and curtains. And the medicine supply is pretty meager. But everybody in the hospital was just very, very open, very anxious to show us whatever they had, and they were extraordinarily proud of it. I think one of the things that I remember that struck me was the windows were open and there were no screens. So, you know, flies and bugs and all kind of stuff were all through the hospital, and you know, it didn't seem to be a problem. They had a clinic that was associated with the hospital where they saw a lot of the children, but the kitchen looked like a nice normal home kitchen except larger, and they only provide 1 meal a day for people. So if you eat more than 1 meal, your family has to help you out. They have a hydration room, which, as best I could understand it, it was next to the ER, and they would just, if somebody came in dehydrated, they would just keep them in there, give them IV fluids, and then send them home. Yes?
And also in this picture, because they have limited resources,
Yes.
this nurse actually used a latex glove as a tourniquet and didn't wear any gloves when she stuck the patient. So that just tells you how resourceful they have to be.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of do makeshift things
Yep.
in order to
Yep.
properly take care of the patients.
Yeah, we saw all sorts of different ways of doing things. The radiology room was troubling to me because I don't have a picture of, you know how when you have an x-ray taken, you stand behind the barricade to protect you from the radiation? They had the barricade, however, where there should have been leaded glass, it was open because they couldn't afford the glass in that partition. So the technician or whoever taking the x-ray is getting straight radiation to the thyroid every time they take an x-ray because they didn't have the money to do it, and again, politically, they can't get what they need. The supply room, they don't have piped in oxygen like we do. They just had tanks to take to the room. But again, they were so excited and pleased with what they had. It was heartening just because of their excitement. They had their mission statement and their vision and their values, which I was quite impressed to see that. And the assistant administrator, I think, translated those for us, and a couple of us got a recording of her giving us the vision and values. We saw a couple different places where they had treatment protocols for dengue fever, chikungunya was the other thing that we found treatment protocols for. And I'm happy to say nobody got sick, sort of. I mean, we had a few stomach issues, but nobody got malaria or chikungunya, so we were proud of that. Transportation was interesting. You could walk, which most people seem to do. There were very few vehicles out in the country where we were. We saw a few horses and mules, donkeys, whatever they were. But mainly, if you needed to go into the city, you go to that little orange stand and you rent a motor scooter for the day. And there are no helmets. And we'll tell them about this school where we...
One day we went to an elementary school to do this one, to do like community education. And as the students were leaving, a mom came up on one of the scooters and picked up 4 of her children, and they all got on the motor scooter to leave. And the roads there, they're dirt roads, and they're it was discriminatory. They kind of panicked.
Yeah, one little child was laying over the handlebars. It was unbelievably scary. Okay, your top left, I guess, was one of the nicer homes in the Dominican Republic. But if you look right beside it, there's a partially built concrete block home. We saw a lot of concrete block, partially built houses, and we kept seeing that over and over and over again. And when we asked Ruben, he said that that's not uncommon because people, if they get a little money, they'll start building. And it may be 15 years before they have money to add to it. So we saw a lot of that, which was to me was rather interesting. A number of Americans have bought in the Dominican Republic and have built these mansions down there. And they may go down once, a couple of weeks during the year, and the rest of the year empty. And they'll be right beside some of the shanties that you might see. The other picture is at Ruben's house in front of his little I don't know what he called it, cooking building. It was outside the house. I failed to say that one of the things that Ruben has done, and it seems to be quite successful, I think, is they've identified what they call community leaders. They identify a woman in the community who is designated as a leader, and they bring those women to their school and teach them about health practices. Then those women in turn are charged with going out to their neighbors and teaching them. And this happens to be the home of one of the community leaders that was built by Project Hearts. And this was one of the nicest homes that we saw, actually, the ones across the top. The young woman who lives in that blue house up top is also starting nursing school, or has she started? I think she started, yeah. So we were excited about that. The bottom picture, those children are standing in front of a home that was built by Project Hearts. And the story with that one was pretty interesting because these children, I think 4 or 5 children, were living with the mother in just basically a lean-to shack on the side of the mountain. Now, we're in the mountains, and when you're riding along and you look off on the side of the road, it might be 50 feet, 50, 60 feet drop. Just narrow roads and you're straight down. So we were up in an area where it was straight down, and Ruben told us about this lean-to where this family lived. And we were there in the rainy season, and he said they had built the house for these children. They had moved into the house, and just a couple days later, the shanty went down the mountain. So the children, it could have killed the family if they had not gotten them into the house. So, but again, the mother took us into the house, and she could not have been more excited and more proud. And I don't know about you all, but I saw very little in her house other than just walls and a roof. Okay, most of the kitchens were outdoors, and in general, the women were all very excited about what they had. This was part of our walking tour in Beatoa, where we went into some houses. Ruben knows everybody, absolutely everybody in that area. And Josh, you'll have to tell him about the rainy day. Tell him about the mud and the rain.
Oh, okay, so the day we were walking, and then so So there's only one car, so even the hospitals don't have ambulance service, so you have to go by private vehicle or motor scooter everywhere. So this one day, the roads were impassable because there were like 10 of us that were on the back of the truck. So some of us had to get out and walk. It was in the middle of the rainy season, so it started to pour down. So we just went to a young lady's house, and everybody just pulled out a chair and we just started talking for about 45 minutes
Until the rain went away. Yeah, Ruben just said, can we just hang out here for a while? So she pulled out her plastic chairs and we sat around and just chilled for a while. Which was
What we did on our walking tour, they saw Ruben and they get the chairs.
Yeah, they all wanted to sit around and chat. In the town, we saw the typical men playing their dominoes. And what we discovered too is different people in the community. Ruben knew where to find anything. At one point he said, y'all want some beer? I know who has some beer. But what happens is people will go to the city and they'll buy a supply of whatever and then come back and just sell it out of their house. You know, no business licenses or anything like that. They but Ruben knows who has what and how to get to it. We fell in love with the children. I think some wanted to bring them home, but they're lovely, lovely little children, and everyone was just very, very loving, very open, very anxious for any kind of interaction. We saw a couple little children running around naked, which was a little surprising to us, but it was in the tropical area, so. Okay, when I talked about smoke, the top left is what happens with the typical open fire cooking. So Project Hearts, the students in the spring built these, some of these cook stoves, the mud brick cook stoves. So we went back and followed up and looked at some of those cook stoves that they had built. But it has much, much less smoke with those. And we also had Dominican cooking lessons. So we learned how to cook beans, rice, and chicken, rice, and beans, rice, chicken, and beans. It's a pretty monotonous diet. But that was fun. Then we went to a clinic. This is yours, Claire.
So one day we were going across by Toa, and I don't even know if we were planning to go to this clinic, but Ruben just told us, like, we're going to go to this clinic. And so we did, and the doctors spoke English, and so we were walking around, and everyone was like going and looking in the rooms, but we noticed on this wall, there's this really intricate map that none of us managed to get a really good picture of. But it looks like they hand drew it, and it has mapped their entire community. And they have different colored pins indicating which diseases, like, they have cases where. So they keep up with everyone by household, what disease it was, like, is it like around water, like what could it have come from? And like, it just shows like how resourceful they are for what they have. Like, they hand drew this thing and keep up with like every case that they have, if they went to their homes, if the patient came here. And so it was really cool. I kind of nerded out on that one.
It was hypertension, diabetes, whatever. The interesting thing that we discovered is there is no mail delivery out in this area, so there are no addresses. So the only way to really be able to figure out who's where was to have a map and know who they live next to, which is pretty fascinating to me. We spent, how many different schools did we do? 3 or 3? Interesting. Ruben was our translator, and we never knew what we were going to do. We would just head out in the morning, and then Ruben would tell us what we were going to do. And sometimes he'd change his plans right in the middle of what we were doing. So, but we went to high school, an elementary school, and a middle school, all of them in the Betola area. We went to the high school that we went to was new. I don't recall how long it had been open, but it was within the last couple of years at least. Project Hearts had built a small high school, because there was not one. And then I guess the government decided that they were being shown up, so they went in and finally built a school. It was a nice school. But Ruben told us what he wanted us to talk about was safety and sex education. It's like, okie dokie. Okie dokie. Fortunately, we had a couple people who are not here that fit the bill. One of our RN mobility student currently works at the infectious disease unit at UAB. So she was very familiar with sexually transmitted infections and she was very comfortable talking about those. So she took on the sex education part. And it really was more targeted to being safe. And then our other person that spoke was Janet, who just finished her DNP in December, and she had a number of years experience as a flight nurse. So she talked to them about road safety and things like that. She chose 5, I think, different cases that she had actually seen, and she presented them to the students. One was drinking and driving, another was gang-related drugs, yeah. And they were extremely compelling stories. And the interesting thing was they brought all the students into this one classroom. It was packed. You could not squeeze another person in. So these students were standing outside. They couldn't get into the room. And they started out, they were sitting on the table just goofing off, not really paying a bit of attention. And by the end of Janet's talk, they were stuck to the window looking in, trying as best they could to hear every word. So they were really hungry for the information and seemed to have listened, which was very gratifying. Something else that happened with the younger children when we went there, we were going to talk about just basic health issues, hand washing, that sort of stuff. And we were shocked that they already knew those things. They knew how to control their cough. So my thought was the whole idea of those community leaders teaching must be working, because those kids knew it, didn't they? It was very nice. Okay, coconut bread factory. When we got to the Dominican Republic, I'll show you a picture of the housing where we stayed, and it was very nice. What we did in the mornings, we fixed our own breakfast, and then we fixed sandwiches to take with us because there's no fast food at all. So we made our sandwiches, and then we ate our evening meals at Ruben's house. Well, one of the things that was in the house for us for breakfast foods were these, not really loaves, but slices of coconut bread, and they were each baked individually. So we all tried this coconut bread. Really, it was good stuff, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Then Ruben told us that we were going to go to the coconut bread factory. So in my mind, I was thinking, the Marita Bread Factory or something like that. Well, the next day it was raining, and we stopped on the side of the road, and Ruben started down between these 2 shanty houses. So I said, "Where are we going?" And he said, "Just follow me." So we're dancing over the slippery rocks and going down this little muddy road. And this is what we found. Right up top, you can see all those coconuts laying out on the ground, waiting to be made into bread. We walked in, and there's a man with some kind of a wooden mallet who was crunching the meat of the coconut, and they made it into this batter, which was in a big pot. And then the woman beside it is putting the batter on the pans. It gets baked in the kiln, and an outdoor kiln, and then dumped onto this huge table where it gets bagged into bags, a dozen per bag. And then the wheelbarrow picked up a bunch of the bags, took them out to this man who is the delivery guy. He's got baskets on the side of his motorcycle. Now, what you don't see here are the flies and the dogs running through. We were all just a little bit put off, I think, when we saw the conditions under which that bread was made. But it was good before we knew that, wasn't it? Anything else about that?
I like the story there about the little boy who Ruben was able
Oh
to get
yes,
the
tell
medication
that,
for.
tell that.
It's really cool. So Ruben just had been visiting this factory, and he found that there was a boy who was probably about 7 or 8 who was still crawling. And actually it was a malnourishment issue, and all he needed was to get access to these vitamins to help his bones develop properly, and now the little boy is walking and up and around. It had only been a few months later. And so it's just like something simple like that where he needed the access to the medication, and Ruben was able to make that connection for him.
Yes, yes, thank you
I
for
think as one thing that became clear as we walked through the neighborhood and began talking with people was just how much of an impact Ruben has had. And people will come up to him in adulthood and say, you know, you gave me my first doll to play with, or you came and sat with me when my mother died. So I thought that was very, very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That much of an impact.
Absolutely. I don't think we encountered anybody who did not know him. I truly don't. At least out in the countryside. Okay, then we went into the big city, which was another experience entirely. We stopped at the public university hospital, and I think we were all anticipating this, just really anxious to see what it was going to be like. This picture was taken with the hospital administrator and the director of nursing, which they were just extremely pleasant and wanted to show us everything. When we got there, the front door was really crowded, and there was just a line of people trying to get into the hospital. And it was just because it was crowded inside. It wasn't that there was anything special going on there. But there were people everywhere, just crowded in. This was a nursing station, which looked pretty nice. It was one of the least crowded places that we saw, I think. There's no OSHA there. If you look over there, you see the little man standing out there. The whole exterior wall is gone. They're doing some construction. He was standing at the edge of that exterior place, and the door was standing open, and there's an elevator, patient elevator, right beside that door frame. So no concern about the dust or anything that was being generated back in there, which was a shock to us. This was another shock. You see an Isolette, and that was probably the most modern looking area that we saw. But they don't keep any babies, or they typically don't keep babies less than 34 weeks because they don't have any success at their survival. You know, and here in the U.S. we save them at 23, 24 weeks. This little guy that was in the Isolette was a 30-weeker, and apparently he just was doing well and in spite of everything. So that was the Isolette. This was kind of a typical patient room. There was one little bitty sink in the room. No sheets on the beds. If you want sheets, you bring your own sheets. If you want a gown, you bring your own gown, or else you wear your clothes. We walked up to the OB area, and there's all these new mamas that are sitting out on this bench outside in the hallway. And, you know, there are people walking through all over, and they're all nursing their babies out in the hallway. And that for me was a bit surprising to see. But yeah, the beds were close together. In the emergency department, we saw they had pulled a bed toward the middle where they were doing CPR, and a patient died, and everybody still is just milling around and looking. The thing that kind of intrigued us all was the top right, that cholera bed. They have a cholera hospital where, and it really was just across an alley that they had this separate little room, little building, where they put people with cholera. And you see that big bucket, they just put you over the hole until your diarrhea abates, and then I guess, I don't know if you stay there the rest of your hospital stay, I don't know. But it looked pretty uncomfortable. to say the least. Josh mentioned the ambulance. They have one ambulance, period. There is no 911 service. They hope to implement 911 service at some point, but right now there is none. So we didn't really find out when their ambulance would be used, but it looks pretty unused to me. It looks pretty shiny. Okay. Who else talked about the day in Sandy Hook? I've talked about. This was our shopping day. Ruben took us straight to a shop. I'm sure it was somebody he knew. And the funny thing for me was Ruben was making prices and he was selling stuff right along with the owner. So we think we got good deals. I'm sure we did. But, the top right, the monument, it's an example of corrupt government. This was a huge monument that was built to some leaders, all of them corrupt. And the interesting thing is they had guards that were there, but they were all locked inside the building. Nobody was on the outside guarding it. I couldn't quite figure that one out. But, it was a beautiful monument, but it was just to corrupt people. The streets were narrow. We saw Quiznos. We saw a few things that were familiar to us. And this beautiful supermarket that was prettier than any I've seen stateside. The man in the wheelchair was kind of interesting. We were watching him. He had a bag of oranges, and he was zipping down in the middle of traffic selling oranges from his wheelchair, which was...
I think one of the things that stuck out to me about, you mentioned the Quiznos about, so how fast food, you usually consider like people on the low SCS scale would typically eat fast food. But the people on the low SCS scale there can afford fast food, so it's more high end, that more fluent that eat the fast food. So that's pretty funny to see.
Mm-hmm. We saw very little. There were no fast food places out where we were.
There's street vendors everywhere.
Yes.
But, you don't know who's handled it and where it came from and all that kind of stuff.
In fact, one of the public health students from Spring cautioned us about some of the street vendor food. Apparently one of them got pretty sick. So this was the infamous van. You gonna tell? Okay, I won't tell it. The door of the van fell off, and the driver just said, "No problemo," and he got out and he wrapped the seatbelt and just kept going. So.
It was our first night. First thing we did. Yeah.
At that point, we all said, "Okay." The shelves in the supermarket were stocked with brands. In fact, it was so nice to have something that was familiar for a change. And I think the Dasani water was maybe calculated to 13 cents a bottle or something like that. So. Okay, Thanksgiving Day. We spent our Thanksgiving Day in the Dominican Republic. And we tell everybody that we had the freshest turkey of anybody for Thanksgiving.
This turkey was our mascot. Every day we come back from volunteering, and this big, beautiful turkey would just meet us in the yard when we were coming in to Thanksgiving. And we noticed that we did, hey, where's the turkey?
It was funny because Josh said, we were sitting down to eat, and Josh said, "Say, Ruben, where did the turkey come?" And I said, "Josh, no, don't ask. I don't want to know." So Ruben and Josh took a walk, and I'm sure Josh got his answer. So we were content just not knowing for certain where that turkey came from until, go ahead.
The next day, we were doing some work in one of Ruben's neighbor's house. We were building a base for a water
Yeah, you
tank,
gotta
and
catch
then putting rocks down so the water would flow through their yard because it's very like dirt and mud in their yards. And we got a wheelbarrow from Ruben's house, and I went to go get it. He's like, Claire, can you go get this from my house? I was like, yeah, sure. And it's full of feathers, and so Santiago, which is the name of the city, was also Ruben's friend's name, came and he like dumped the feathers and stuff out, so I was wheeling it back, and I looked down as I'm walking, and there's some inside body part of the wheelbarrow, and I didn't touch it. I let one of them get it. So it was confirmed where our turkey came from.
But it was really nice of them to
It was
embrace
great. It
our
was
holiday
fantastic.
and do all of that. I mean, everybody's there just so giving, and they have nothing really, but they want you to have as much as you want.
And I forgot, when we were in Santiago and we stopped at the supermarket, Ruben went in to buy dressing and cranberry sauce for us. And one of his daughters, when she got the cranberry sauce, she said, "What is this?" But we had fresh avocado every meal, every day. I don't even like avocado, but it was really, really good. And Ruben had a stalk of bananas hanging out under his little pavilion there. That's where we ate all our meals. But you could, at the end of your meal, you didn't have dessert. You just went and pulled you a banana off and had that for your dessert. And they were delicious. But the turkey, if you look on this plate, it's on the left side of the plate. It didn't look like our turkeys. It didn't look like our Thanksgiving turkey at all. I think they used the machete to cut it up because it was not recognizable as turkey. And I have to admit, I didn't do any. After Thanksgiving dinner, we went back to our houses, and this pretty gazebo was out there. And we were on the top of a little hill, so in the gazebo, we had dance lessons. And I think you all taught the Dominicans some American dance steps. I won't talk about that, what you did. It was just fun. It was one of those very relaxing, restful evenings. Beautiful, too. Even the dogs were friendly there. Okay, then, Katie.
This is just another example of how Ruben just really did a great job of identifying needs in the community. One day we just spent a morning going to a house where a couple older ladies lived, and they also had some of their grandchildren that would live with them often. And the yard just had a lot of erosion, and with the mud, it was going away. And with the mountains, there was a concern that would start affecting the house itself. So we just got some rocks from the side of the road and just put it where the water usually flowed, just to help with that erosion and everything. And it's something really simple, but Ruben said it makes a big difference, not only to those community members, but it makes a difference for the community to see us just out on the side of the road helping out in any way we can. And it was just really funny too, because the older ladies knew that we were nurses. They wanted Ashley to come check their blood pressure, and a lot of times they just are wanting that attention and needing the interaction. And this is another thing we're doing at the house is they have a water filtration system they put in, and it's a clay water filtration system, so it doesn't actually need anything else. Once you set it up, it can just drain the rainwater itself, and it holds it in a big tank. And the biggest thing though is it needs a good base to be put up on, so it can be level with the house, so as it drains it can be at the right level. And so Josh and some of the stronger guys in the community helped with putting that together.
I know Josh in his journal said he was glad he didn't have to do that every day that he was there.
It's a lot of work, making cement and everything.
If you remember, those buildings that were partially built had concrete blocks, and here's concrete blocks. There's a cement factory between Betoa and Santiago. Puts out a lot of pollution, but it also creates some jobs and some raw materials. This was one of our fun experiences. Ruben has a farm, so we did a tasting of everything on the farm. He had, macadamia nut trees, almond trees, avocados. See the pod for the cocoa up here? I had never seen cocoa in its initial stages, but you split it open, and then there's this white slimy stuff that it's kind of citrusy. You kind of suck that off, and then I broke the law. I broke international law. I brought one of the seeds home. It's over there on the table. You want to see what the cocoa seed looks like, and it's cracked and pounded to make cocoa. Up in the top right, there is a berry called the lipstick berry that the Taino Indians use to paint their skin. So everybody had to put on some berry lipstick while they were there. Do you see the machetes? Katie has a machete, Janet has a machete, Ruben has a machete. We were all chewing on some sugar cane there. That was kind of fun. But we handled critters that some of them had never touched before. And
I did not touch over there. The spiders were giant.
oh yes. I don't know if I told them this, but our first night there, these three and one other person and I were in one house, and then Josh was with us in that same house. First night we got there, we were just putting our stuff down, and I hear this scream from the girls' room. And so I'm running in to see what it was, and I'm not sure, I don't know who it was, but somebody had a shoe in their hand and said, "Can I throw my shoe up there and kill that spider?" And it was way up high, and I said, "Okay." And I said, "No, we're not going to deface the property. We don't mean to throw the shoe." So we improvised a little ball out of socks, and we were standing in there throwing to try to knock the spider down because we knew nobody would sleep with that spider up there. So finally the spider got knocked down, and then you hear a bunch of screaming and stomping as everybody's either trying to kill the spider or get away from it. But anyhow, somebody, and I don't know which one, said, "I saw a tarantula," and everybody else said, no, it was not a tarantula. Well, several days later, it was a tarantula because it was in my room. I don't know if I told you all this or not, but I knew that I couldn't scream because I would set off a mass panic, and Josh wasn't around to kill it for me.
And they had really nice houses that they put us in. It was very different than like where the rest of the community lived. It was actually some Americans' houses they used for groups like this, but they still had the spiders and everything.
This was our housing was very nice. The biggest problem was that the electricity would go off periodically. Mostly
We
in the
had
gold
three
house.
houses, and there's the pink, the blue, and gold house. And the pink and the blue house always had hot water, electricity. And the gold house that we all stayed in, we went without electricity quite often, and very cold showers.
Yeah, never hot water.
You get used to it though, believe it or not.
Yeah, apparently the electricity is controlled by the government, and they just, I guess it's sort of like rolling blackouts, and you never know when it's going to happen, you don't know how long it's going to be, so you just, when you got electricity, you hop in the shower real quick. The pink house is where part of folks stayed, and that's where these pictures are inside the pink house. That's where the food was, that we fixed our breakfast and everything. And then we had devotionals. Ruben is an extraordinarily well-read man, and he has tremendous wisdom and insight into a lot of things. We enjoyed listening to him in the mornings. And I know school risk management would never approve of us riding students in the back of an open pickup truck, but it was either that or not go. And thankfully, nobody got sick. And sometimes I had to put students in timeout there. Ashley?
It was amazing just to walk out your front door and be able to see this every morning. You never really knew what the weather was going to be like, but thankfully it only really rained one day the whole time we were there. It kind of put us back a little bit because of the mud. But one day we have siestas too. You get to go back and take a nap and everything's just really laid back. Well, one day I woke up, and so I walked up to the pink house, and Miss Hamilton's out there just frantically taking pictures, and I look, and there's this beautiful double rainbow that's out there after it just rained. And it's just incredible,
And you
everything that you
Yeah,
see.
you could actually see the color on the buildings on the ground. I don't think I've ever seen a rainbow that you could follow all the way to the ground like that. And then we had to say goodbye, which was very bittersweet for us. We had really grown to love the folks that we had encountered. I think one of my favorite pictures actually is Claire there dancing with Miguelito. That child attached himself to her. And if you saw earlier the two of them in the hammock, he was just talking to Claire and talking when we first met him. And I said, Claire, what's he saying? She said, I have no idea. And she just sit there, okay, yes. But it was a fabulous experience. And I think, well, Claire is going back spring break, and then one of our other students, apparently her family, several of her family, they're planning to go back on a trip, kind of a mission trip. And she actually has taken the initiative to design a T-shirt, and is selling T-shirts to raise money for
We have a picture of it too. One of our group members just decided that she was going to take initiative and create a T-shirt to raise money for Project Hearts, to kind of, send over money. And the exchange rate is what, $1 to 44 pesos? Yeah, is that right? But yeah, so if you want a T-shirt, you can come see me. They're $20, and all the proceeds go to Project Hearts and Ruben's organization, and will help with like the housing and water treatment and everything.
So I think their biggest problem is really funding. And so you talk about like all these ideas he had, and it's incredible how little funding you need to make a difference. Like I think the water filter for a school costs $250 in like America and money, but they just didn't even have the funding for that. And so they just put it in one of the schools, but they have 3 other schools in the area, and they're hoping to start a water filtration system in, so that way the kids could have fresh water to drink during like recess and things.
One of the stories, and I know it's about our time, but one of the stories that really distressed us all was the story of when we went to the clinic and they told us about in October, we were there in November, and they told us in October that 11 babies had died in the city, not Santiago, it was in Santo Domingo. 11 babies had died, and it was primarily because of corruption and lack of funding. And I researched it a little bit further, and their oxygen system failed in the hospital, and their elevator was broken, so they couldn't get tanks. The interns didn't know how to work the ventilators. It was just a comedy of errors, but it just, it's heartbreaking to realize that in today's time, with the resources that are available to us, that could ever happen. So gave us a real perspective on what we have here in this country. Anything else, ladies?
I think just like your closing things, I really like Project Hearts because you can see all this corruption within the entire city and everything. It's hard to see like where you can fix these sort of things, but Project Hearts does a good job of identifying like needs in the community that you can fix now and like make a difference. And I really like the empowering the woman, because Ruben's whole thing is if you empower the woman, you change the children, and then you change the future. So I think it's very realistic and making a difference within communities in the Dominican Republic.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anything else, Claire? Ashley? Any questions for us? We had a good time, can you tell? Okay, well, thank you.